Before diving into this incredible story, consider subscribing to the channel and hitting the bell. Every story here has something to say, and you won't want to miss a single one. Harold Jenkins, a 72-year-old man, walked slowly through the spacious showroom of Prestige Motors. His graying hair and slightly stooped posture betrayed years of hard work and sacrifice. Yet on this day, no one paid him the slightest attention. The salespeople, absorbed in their tablets and their younger customers, completely ignored him. Harold had saved his entire life to finally be able to afford the car of his dreams, but he felt invisible, scorned by professionals who seemed only to see the easy money. Frustrated and humiliated, an idea popped into his head: if no one would respect him here, he would change the rules of the game. Harold Jenkins wasn't just a retiree, he was a seasoned investor and entrepreneur, having built and sold several successful businesses. In a fit of determination, he decided to buy Prestige Motors. The deal went quickly, and within a few weeks, Harold became the official owner. What followed surprised everyone. Without warning, he fired the entire staff, including the salespeople who had ignored him, the arrogant managers, and even the director who believed he could underestimate him. His message was clear: respect cannot be bought, it must be earned. The now empty showroom echoed with memories of past humiliations, while Harold, stoic, plotted his revenge. But behind this radical decision lay an even bolder plan, one that would disrupt far more than just the dealership's operations. Harold Jenkins walked into the Prestige Motors showroom that Tuesday morning, his heart filled with hope. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his jacket, a sign that he was nervous but determined. He had saved every cent of his retirement to buy a luxury car he had always coveted. As soon as he walked through the glass doors, a professional silence greeted him, or at least, that's what he thought. The salespeople were all absorbed in their screens, talking among themselves, laughing at jokes Harold didn't understand. He waited patiently for an advisor to come and help him, hoping for a smile or a welcoming gesture. But nothing came. "Excuse me," he dared in a trembling voice. No glances. No sign of recognition. Just murmurs and muffled laughter from across the showroom. Harold felt a wave of anger mixed with shame wash over him. How could anyone ignore someone like him? He had built his life with dignity and hard work, and now a group of young, inexperienced salesmen dared to treat him as if he were invisible. After several minutes of waiting, a young man in an ill-fitting shirt finally approached. "Hello, are you looking for something in particular?" he asked in a barely polite tone. Harold, clenching his fists, replied calmly, "Yes, I would like to see the new series of sports cars." The salesman shrugged and walked off toward the corner of the cars without another word. Harold followed, trying not to let his frustration show. Every stifled laugh, every averted glance, every second of that silent contempt strengthened his resolve. This wasn't just about the car, it was about respect. As he surveyed the lined-up vehicles, an idea formed in his mind: if no one here respects me, I'll show them what it means to underestimate me. A cold smile crossed his wrinkled face. That day, Harold Jenkins decided that this humiliation would not go unpunished. Back home, Harold sat down at his desk, surrounded by papers, financial records, and old contracts from companies he had once run. The morning's anger and humiliation hadn't left him cold, they had ignited a fire within him he hadn't felt in years. Harold knew exactly what he had to do. He wasn't going to just complain or leave. He was going to take back control. "If those young salesmen think I can't do anything about them, they'll learn quickly," he muttered to himself, a determined smile playing on his lips. He began by studying the structure of Prestige Motors. Using his contacts in the automotive industry and years of investment experience, Harold discovered that the dealership was for sale, but no one dared to invest due to the company's poor reputation and arrogant sales team. For Harold, this was a golden opportunity. In less than a week, he mobilized his resources, signed the purchase papers, and officially became the new owner of Prestige Motors. For most of the employees, this came as a complete shock. The manager, surprised and incredulous, tried to negotiate. "Harold. I mean, Mr. Jenkins, it's not necessary, we can work together." But Harold slowly shook his head. No. You all ignored me, humiliated me, and underestimated me. The entire staff will be replaced. I'm taking over the company." His voice, calm but firm, left an icy impression on the room. The next day, rumors spread quickly. Harold Jenkins, the man they'd been ignoring, had bought the dealership and fired the entire staff. The arrogant salesmen and the pretentious managers were all left without jobs. In the showroom, the heavy silence reminded everyone that respect couldn't be bought, it had to be earned. Harold, standing in the center of the empty hall, looked at the perfectly aligned rows of cars and felt a mixture of satisfaction and anticipation. This was only the beginning. Behind this radical decision lay an even bolder plan, to transform Prestige Motors into a company that would never ignore a customer, and that would prove that no one, even the most arrogant, should underestimate Harold Jenkins. The showroom, now empty of all staff, gave Harold an eerie feeling. The silence was almost solemn, but for him, it symbolized a new beginning. No more arrogant salespeople or casual managers. Every detail would be under his own control. Harold began by recruiting new employees, but not just any employees. He looked for people who were serious, respectful, competent, and passionate about their work. Advertisements were posted throughout the city, and soon, candidates of all ages and backgrounds were responding. Unlike his former colleagues, these newcomers weren't there to play salesmen, but to provide quality service. Meanwhile, Harold completely reorganized the showroom. The cars were carefully arranged, the offices refurbished, and the lighting changed to create a modern and welcoming atmosphere. Every detail counted. He wanted every customer who walked through the door to feel valued and respected, unlike what he himself had experienced. But Harold wasn't content with just physically rebuilding the company. He also began studying his competitors' sales and marketing strategies, identifying every flaw and opportunity. His vision went far beyond Prestige Motors. He wanted to create a standard where the customer was never ignored and where staff were motivated and recognized. The first few days with the new staff were surprising for Harold. The employees listened, offered ideas, and most importantly, respected their boss. For the first time in a long time, Harold felt a real sense of control and satisfaction. However, not everything went smoothly. Some customers accustomed to the old team resisted the change, showing suspicion. Harold was undaunted. Every objection was an opportunity to demonstrate the difference. Thanks to his patience, experience, and natural authority, he quickly transformed skeptics into loyal customers. At the end of the chapter, Harold stood on the mezzanine overlooking the showroom, contemplating the fruits of his labor. This is only the beginning, he thought. The real challenge would come from outside, how Prestige Motors would recapture the market and prove to all those who had ignored it that underestimating Harold Jenkins had been their biggest mistake. A few weeks after Prestige Motors officially reopened, the business began to attract attention. Harold's new practices, total respect for the customer, personalized service, and transparency in sales, were already generating impressive word of mouth. Satisfied customers weren't just returning, they were telling others about the experience, and the dealership's once mediocre reputation began to transform. However, any success inevitably attracts jealous glances. Neighboring dealers, accustomed to dominating the market through aggressive tactics and unprofessional teams, began to grumble. Some tried to copy Harold's methods, but without his authority and charisma, their efforts were in vain. One morning, the manager of the competing dealership, Mark Callahan, showed up at Prestige Motors under the pretext of greeting Harold. But Harold, far from being fooled, immediately knew that Mark was trying to unsettle him. "You're making a lot of noise for a small dealership," Mark said with a condescending smile. Harold, impassive, replied calmly, "Respect and service are not optional, Mark. They are the foundation of any sustainable business." Tensions were rising quickly. Mark tried to entice some of Harold's loyal customers with tempting offers, but each attempt failed. Harold had established a level of trust and loyalty that was not easily broken. Employees, motivated by Harold's vision and the example of his leadership, were more efficient and dedicated than ever. At the same time, Harold decided to capitalize on the media attention. He invited local journalists to tour the showroom, interview the new employees, and witnessed the dealership's spectacular revival. The published articles began to portray Harold as the man who had transformed an ignorant and arrogant company into a model of excellence and respect. At the end of the day, watching the cars gleam under the showroom lights and seeing excited customers leave with smiles, Harold felt a profound sense of victory. This was no longer just personal revenge against those who had ignored him, it was the birth of a new era for Prestige Motors. But Harold knew this was only the beginning. The real battle wasn't just against competitors. Some former employees, humiliated and furious, had vowed revenge. And Harold was ready to face whatever came his way to protect his fledgling empire. A few months after transforming Prestige Motors into a beacon of success and customer respect, Harold thought he could breathe a sigh of relief. But the peace was short-lived. Rumors began to circulate. Some former employees, humiliated by their dismissal, had banded together to create a small rival company, determined to undermine Harold and reclaim what they considered their turf. One morning, Harold received a panicked call from Sarah, his new marketing manager. "Mr. Jenkins, we have a problem. Customers are reporting that they've been contacted by a competing dealership offering deals they can't refuse. Some of our loyal customers are being tempted." Harold, calm but attentive, replied, "Show me those offers. We will counter intelligently." He went there to assess the situation. Indeed, his former employees had developed an aggressive strategy, slashing prices, exaggerated promises, and even subtle smears about Harold and his new team. But Harold knew that true strength lay in trust and reputation, two things no amount of manipulation could break. Rather than retaliate with anger, Harold opted for a more strategic approach. He held an open house at the showroom, inviting all potential and current customers to experience the authentic Prestige Motors experience. Customers were impressed by the staff's welcoming attitude, transparency, and professionalism. The competing dealership, despite its low prices, couldn't match the human experience and reliability Harold offered. This first assault, orchestrated by his former employees, failed. Harold had anticipated every move and proven that past humiliation did not make him vulnerable, it made him more strategic and resilient. At the end of the day, Harold stood in the center of the showroom, watching his smiling, motivated team. "Every attack is an opportunity to show our strength," he said with a smile. "They think they can destabilize us, but they don't know Harold Jenkins." Yet in the shadows, a hand tightened on a phone, and an even more audacious plan was brewing to try to harm Harold and his fledgling empire. The real challenge had only just begun. As the months passed, Prestige Motors continued to prosper. Customers returned faithfully, won over by the professionalism and personal attention Harold had established. But his former employees and jealous competitors weren't about to give up. This time, they decided to make the attack more personal. One morning, Harold received an anonymous letter. Inside were several compromising photos of the dealership, employees chatting, leaked internal memos, and even information on some VIP customers. The intention was clear: to tarnish his reputation and sow distrust among his customers. Harold calmly read the letter, analyzing every detail. He knew that giving in to anger would be the worst mistake. "They're trying to hit me where it hurts, but they still don't know my strategy," he murmured. He immediately summoned his team. "Listen to me," he said gravely. "We will not be intimidated by threats. We will turn this attack into an opportunity. We will prove to our clients that transparency and honesty are our strength." Harold then launched a public communication campaign. He invited customers to visit the dealership and meet each member of the team, openly explaining the situation and demonstrating the reliability of his company. This initiative strengthened customer confidence and forced his enemies to back down. The attempted sabotage, far from harming Harold, reinforced his image as an honest and unflappable leader. But Harold knew the attack was far from over. Behind these maneuvers was someone who knew his past and his vulnerabilities. Someone capable of striking not only his reputation, but his entire life. Looking around the showroom filled with satisfied customers and motivated employees, Harold felt a mixture of pride and vigilance. "They think they can unsettle me," he thought. "They don't know that every blow they land makes me stronger." The time for great confrontations was approaching. The war for Prestige Motors, was no longer just commercial, it had become personal. Harold knew that to protect Prestige Motors and his team, he had to identify who was really pulling the strings behind these attacks. For several days, he pored over every detail: anonymous calls, letters, local rumors. Thanks to his experience as an entrepreneur and investor, he managed to piece together the clues. The truth hit him like a bolt of lightning: it was his former manager, Richard Manning, who had orchestrated the attacks. Humiliated and furious at being fired, Richard had recruited several former employees to form a small rival dealership and launch underhanded maneuvers against Harold. Harold didn't let anger overcome him. On the contrary, he felt his resolve strengthen. "Richard thinks he can destroy me, but he doesn't know who he's dealing with," he murmured, a cold smile on his face. He decided to play the card of cunning rather than direct confrontation. Harold invited Richard to a professional meeting under the pretext of negotiating peace and discussing a partnership. Richard, confident in himself, immediately accepted, believing he could manipulate the situation to his advantage. On the day of the meeting, Harold displayed impressive calm. "Richard," he began, "I know everything you've done to try to harm me. I know your plans, your former employees, everything." Richard, taken aback, tried to deny it, but Harold continued confidently, "You thought you could unsettle me, but you only revealed your incompetence and pettiness." Then Harold put the finishing touches: he made Richard an unexpected offer. "You want to play power games? Fine. But I'm offering you one chance to redeem yourself: work honestly with me, or your actions against me will be made public and your reputation will be permanently ruined." Richard, furious and humiliated, realized he could no longer manipulate the situation. Harold had not only discovered the mastermind behind the attacks, but he had also turned the situation to his advantage, transforming the threat into absolute control. At the end of the chapter, Harold stood in his office, looking out at the bustling showroom behind him. He knew the business battle was far from over, but for the first time, he had brought to his knees the one who thought he could destroy him. "Everything that happens to me makes me stronger," Harold thought. "And this is just the beginning of my total revenge." After confronting Richard, Harold knew he had to strike a blow to permanently secure his position and protect Prestige Motors from future attacks. He decided to make the confrontation public, not out of gratuitous revenge, but to show everyone the difference between integrity and malice. He organized a special event at the showroom, inviting the local press, loyal customers, business partners, and even competitors. The theme of the day was clear: honesty and respect above all. Harold was ready to expose the shenanigans of Richard and his team. When Richard arrived, confident, Harold greeted him calmly. "Richard, thank you for coming," he said with a smile. "Today we're going to clarify some things." Before an attentive crowd and cameras focused on them, Harold calmly and precisely exposed all the sabotage plans orchestrated by Richard and his former employees. He presented evidence: emails, testimonies from former employees, photos, and internal documents. Each piece of the puzzle was presented logically and transparently, leaving Richard defenseless. The public's reaction was immediate: murmurs, gasps of surprise, and admiration for Harold. The customers saw not only a competent boss, but also a man of integrity who had managed to turn humiliation into strength and intelligently protect his business. Richard, publicly humiliated, understood that any attempt at revenge had failed. At the end of the event, Harold said these memorable words: "Those who try to underestimate me always discover too late that respect is not something you ask for, it is something you earn." And at Prestige Motors, we never forget that. The press published glowing articles, customers praised Harold for his transparency and exemplary management, and even competitors began to recognize his superiority in the industry. Prestige Motors' reputation went from mediocre to iconic, and Harold could finally savor a complete victory, the fruit of his patience, strategy, and intelligence. But Harold knew that in the business world, vigilance was always necessary. Every success brought new threats. However, this time, he was ready to face whatever came his way, because he had proven one essential truth: no one could ignore or underestimate him. Having brought Richard to his knees and cemented his reputation, Harold Jenkins knew that the real challenge now lay in transforming Prestige Motors into a key regional, or even national, company. It was no longer just a matter of defending his territory, but of creating a model that would inspire the automotive industry. Harold began by further modernizing the showroom, interactive customer areas, virtual vehicle test drives, personalized financing and maintenance services. Each innovation was designed to enhance the customer experience and build loyalty. The results were immediate. Prestige Motors quickly became the most visited dealership in the city, with customers sometimes traveling hours simply to enjoy the unique experience on offer. At the same time, Harold developed an internal training program for his employees, instilling in them the importance of professionalism, transparency, and human connection. He knew that his success depended on a strong and motivated team. Former employees from other dealerships even began applying to join his team, attracted by Harold's reputation as a fair and demanding leader. But Harold didn't forget his enemies. He always kept an eye on Richard and his associates, ready to intervene at the slightest attempt at sabotage. This constant vigilance ensured that Prestige Motors remained untouchable, while also sending a clear message: no one could challenge Harold Jenkins with impunity. Thanks to his bold strategies and clear vision, Harold also began receiving partnership offers from major automotive companies. Instead of giving in too quickly, he negotiated each agreement carefully, ensuring that each partnership reflected the values he had championed from the start: respect, quality, and integrity. At the end of this chapter, Harold stood at the top of the showroom's main hall, surveying the impeccable lines of cars, the satisfied customers, and his dedicated team. He felt a deep sense of pride. What had begun as a personal humiliation had turned into a resounding triumph. Those who ignored me, he thought, never imagined I would turn this pain into an empire. Prestige Motors was no longer just a dealership, it was a symbol of resilience, strategy, and leadership. Harold knew the climb didn't stop there. Each success paved the way for new ambitions and new challenges. After years of hard work, Prestige Motors had become a name synonymous with excellence, respect, and innovation in the automotive industry. Harold Jenkins, the man who had been ignored and humiliated, had transformed a simple personal revenge into a veritable empire. Customers flocked from all over the country, attracted by the unique experience the dealership offered. Richard's former employees, who had tried to harm Harold, no longer posed any threat. Richard himself, now discredited, had disappeared from the local scene. The lesson was clear: underestimating Harold Jenkins was a mistake no one was willing to repeat. Harold didn't just savor his victory. He invested in new technology, expanded his dealership network, and built a strong and loyal management team. Every decision he made reflected the experience he had acquired: humility toward customers, toughness toward competition, and a long-term strategic vision. One evening, as he watched the showroom come alive with neon lights and the quiet hum of electric motors, Harold thought back to the day he'd been ignored. The humiliation he'd felt then had become a driving force. Every obstacle, every attack, every sabotage had served to strengthen his resolve. He smiled, satisfied. "What I built isn't just for me," he murmured. "It's to show that no one, regardless of age or situation, should ever accept being ignored or looked down upon." Harold Jenkins had not only avenged the affront he had suffered, but he had also built a lasting legacy. His empire was not built on fear or manipulation, but on respect, competence, and perseverance. The showroom, filled with enthusiastic customers and dedicated employees, shone like a symbol of triumph. Harold knew the challenges would never end, but he was ready to face them. After all, every past difficulty had shaped him into the man he had become: powerful, respected, and untouchable. Thus ended the story of Harold Jenkins, the man who had been ignored, and who had managed to transform humiliation into total revenge and resounding success.